In 1916, something pretty remarkable happened. Two of India's biggest political rivals, people who almost never saw eye to eye, decided to join forces. Now, for anyone prepping for the UPSC exams, you know that understanding the Lucknow Pact isn't just a good idea, it's absolutely essential. So in this explainer, we're going to break it all down. How it happened, what it was all about, and why, even today, its legacy is so fiercely debated.
All right, here's our game plan. We'll start with that incredible moment of unity itself. Then, we'll rewind a bit to see what led them to Lucknow in the first place. We'll spotlight the key players, the architects of the pact, get into the nitty-gritty of what they agreed on, and then wrap up by unpacking its really complex, long-lasting impact.
So, let's kick things off with a big question, the real head-scratcher here. How on earth did the Indian National Congress and the All India Muslim League, two groups with, let's be honest, very different ideas, managed to find common ground and stand shoulder to shoulder against the British?
And here's the bottom line. The Lucknow Pact was a huge deal because it was the very first time these two major political forces came together with a formal agreement. I mean, think about it. By creating a single united front, they sent a massive signal to the British and gave the entire nationalist movement a serious boost of strength. Okay, so this unity didn't just pop up out of nowhere. There was a lot going on behind the scenes. So let's move on and really dig into the specific events, both in India and around the world, that set the stage for this kind of unprecedented alliance. Now, this is where things get really interesting, because you start to see how global events were directly impacting the freedom struggle back in India. You see, for many Indian Muslims, the Sultan of Turkey wasn't just a ruler. He was the caliph, the spiritual leader of Islam. So when Britain basically turned its back on the Ottoman Empire during these wars, it wasn't just a political move. To many, it felt like a deep betrayal. And that feeling started pushing the Muslim League away from its usual pro-British position.
And it wasn't just about foreign policy. Things were heating up at home, too. The British said no to giving the super-influential Aligarh College full university status. Then, with World War I raging, they cracked down hard. They shut down nationalist newspapers, they threw popular leaders in jail. All of this just pushed anti-British feelings to a boiling point. It created the perfect environment for a new, younger, and much more assertive generation of leaders within the League to rise up. Leaders who were fiercely anti-imperialist and saw a huge advantage in teaming up with the Congress. Of course, an agreement of this magnitude, well, it doesn't just happen by itself, right? It takes real visionaries, people who can build bridges over some pretty deep divides. So, who were the key architects? Who were the masterminds that actually made this unity happen? And this famous quote just says it all. It perfectly captures the absolutely central role played by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. You know, this wasn't just a nice compliment from Sarojini Naidu. It was a fact. At that specific moment in time, Jinnah was a member of both the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League. He was literally the man in the middle, the perfect person to bridge that gap. So this shows you that it was kind of like a two-pronged attack on division. While Jinnah was building that crucial bridge between the two parties, you had Gangadhar Tilak doing some major repair work within his own party. The Congress had been split for years between the so-called extremists and moderates. Tilak knew that before they could unite with anyone else, they had to unite themselves. Without both of these leaders getting their jobs done, the whole Lucknow Pact just wouldn't have been possible. Okay, so let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What was actually in the pact? We're going to break it down into two main parts: the big compromises that were made to get everyone in the room, and the powerful unified demands that came out of it. But first, we have to wrap our heads around this one key term: separate electorates. Basically, it was a system where Muslims would vote only for Muslim candidates in their own separate elections. Now, for years, the Congress had fought this tooth and nail. They saw it as a classic British divide-and-rule tactic. So for them to agree to it here, that was the single biggest, most controversial compromise of the entire pact. A huge concession. This table just lays it all out, nice and simple. It was a classic give and take. On one side, you have the Congress making that historic concession, accepting separate electorates and guaranteeing a certain number of legislative seats for Muslims. And what did they get in return? They got what they'd been fighting for: a powerful, united voice demanding major reforms, a clear path towards self-rule, and more Indians at the highest levels of government. And they didn't just stop at big ideas. Oh no, they got right into the fine print. They wanted legislative councils with set 5-year terms. They wanted most of the members to be elected, not just appointed. And this was a really clever move. They demanded that the salary for the top British official for India be paid by Britain, not from Indian money. It was a direct shot at the economic drain of colonial rule.
So, the pact is signed. What happens next? What's the real legacy here? Well, to get the full picture, you kind of have to look at it as a story of two halves. There are the immediate positive results, and then there are the long-term, much more complicated consequences.
And this is where we see that the Lucknow Pact was a true double-edged sword. On one hand, it was a spectacular success. The show of unity totally undermined Britain's divide-and-rule game and directly led to reforms. But on the other hand, and this is the real tragic irony, by officially accepting separate electorates, the Congress unintentionally gave legitimacy to the very idea of communal politics. Many argue that it sowed the first seeds of the division that would eventually, tragically, lead to partition decades later.
And believe me, this unified pressure worked, and it worked fast. Just a year later, in 1917, the British government issued the Montagu Declaration. For the very first time, they officially promised the gradual development of self-governing institutions in India. That was a direct win, a clear result of the joint demands made in Lucknow. But, and this is the really important thing to remember, that unity in 1916, as incredible as it was built on shaky ground. It was more of a strategic alliance for a common goal, not a true merger of ideologies. And the irony is, the very thing that sealed the deal, separate electorates, would soon become the main point of conflict that would drive the two parties apart again. And that leaves us right here, with a big, critical question you need to grapple with for your analysis. Was the Lucknow Pact a brilliant masterstroke of political unity that put the British on the back foot? Or was it a strategic compromise that, while good in the short term, ultimately put India on a path towards division? Thanks so much for joining this explainer. We really hope this detailed breakdown helps you tackle this complex topic in your preparation.